The first gunshot scattered the crows from the old oak tree as Hannah Doyle ran through the muddy streets of Willow Creek, her swollen belly betraying the secret she'd managed to keep for nearly 6 months. Blood trickled down her cheek where Jacob Turner's wife had struck her with the back of a hairbrush, screaming accusations that echoed in Hannah's ears even as she fled the general store. Everyone knew now. Everyone had seen. The town she'd called home for 23 years had turned on her in an instant. "Jezebel!" Mrs. Peterson shouted from her porch as Hannah rushed past, clutching her tattered shawl around her shoulders. "Running won't hide your shame." The year was 1878, and for a woman alone in the Wyoming Territory, carrying a child with no husband to claim, it was tantamount to wearing a scarlet letter. Hannah had known this day would come, but foolishly hoped the townsfolk who'd watched her grow from a child might show compassion when her secret was revealed. She was wrong. Her boots slipped in the spring mud as she reached the small cabin at the edge of town, where she'd lived since her father's passing last winter. Inside, she frantically gathered what little she owned into a carpetbag: clothes, her mother's cameo, the $23 she'd saved working at the millinery. It wouldn't last long, but she couldn't stay in Willow Creek. Not anymore. The knock at her door startled her so badly she dropped the small tin of biscuits she was packing. "Hannah, open up. The Reverend wants to speak with you." It was Sheriff Mills, his voice carrying an unusual tension. Hannah remained silent, continuing to pack with trembling hands. "Hannah, don't make this harder than it needs to be." She slipped out the back window, wincing as her growing belly made the escape more difficult than it would have been months ago. In the distance, she could hear the voices growing louder in town, the righteous indignation building. Jacob Turner was a married man, a respected businessman with 4 children and a position on the town council. She was just the milliner's daughter, an orphan now. No one would take her side against him, especially when he'd already denied everything, claiming she was a woman of questionable virtue. Hannah stumbled toward the stables, praying Charlie Watson wasn't there. The old stable hand had always been kind to her, but kindness had its limits when faced with the collective fury of a small town. To her relief, the stables were empty save for the horses. She quickly saddled her father's old mare, Penny, grateful she'd kept the animal instead of selling her after his death. As she led the horse out the back of the stables, voices approached from the direction of her cabin. They'd discovered her escape. Hannah mounted awkwardly, adjusting her skirts around her belly before urging Penny toward the western trail. She had a cousin in Colorado who might take her in, though they hadn't corresponded in years. The hoofbeats behind her came sooner than expected. Hannah glanced back to see 3 riders gaining on her, Sheriff Mills in the lead. She kicked Penny harder, but the old mare was no match for their fresher mounts. "Hannah Doyle, stop right there," Sheriff Mills called out. She ignored him, pushing Penny faster until the horse was lathered and blowing hard. When the trail forked, Hannah veered left toward the river, hoping to lose them. The spring melt had turned the usually placid Snake River into a churning torrent, but the bridge was her only hope of putting real distance between her and her pursuers. The bridge came into view, old, rickety, but still standing. Hannah urged Penny forward, the mare's hooves clattering on the wooden planks. Halfway across, a terrible crack split the air. Hannah screamed as the bridge gave way beneath them, plunging horse and rider into the icy waters below. The shock of cold water knocked the breath from her lungs. Hannah fought to stay above the surface, one hand instinctively protecting her belly as the current swept her downstream. Penny had been torn from her by the force of the water, and Hannah caught a glimpse of the mare swimming strongly toward the bank. The river pulled her under again, her sodden clothes dragging her down. When she surfaced, gasping, the riders were distant figures on the bank, Sheriff Mills gesturing frantically. Hannah fought against the current, but her strength was failing. Just as darkness began to close in, strong hands grabbed her, hauling her toward shore. "I've got you. Hold on, miss." The deep voice was unfamiliar, the grip unfailing as her rescuer dragged her from the river's clutches and onto the muddy bank. Hannah coughed violently, expelling river water from her lungs as she curled protectively around her belly. "The baby," she gasped. "My baby." The man kneeling beside her went still. "You're with child," Hannah nodded weakly, finally looking up at the stranger who'd saved her life. He was tall and broad-shouldered, his face weathered by sun and wind beneath the shadow of a worn cavalry hat. Dark blonde hair curled at his collar, and his eyes, a striking shade of blue, assessed her with concern. "Name's Adam Vance," he said, shrugging out of his duster and wrapping it around her shivering form. "You're safe now. Can you stand?" Hannah tried, but her legs buckled beneath her. Without hesitation, Adam lifted her into his arms. "My horse," Hannah protested weakly. "Looks like she made it across just fine." Adam nodded toward where Penny grazed nervously near a stand of trees. "I'll fetch her after I get you warm." He carried her to where his own horse waited, a magnificent black stallion that stood patiently as Adam lifted Hannah onto its back before swinging up behind her. He kept one arm securely around her waist as he guided the horse away from the river. "Those men were after you," he said, not a question but a statement. Hannah nodded, too exhausted to explain. "Well, they'll think the river took you. Gives us time to get you somewhere safe." "Why are you helping me?" Hannah whispered, her voice raw from coughing. Adam was silent for a moment. "Let's just say I know what it's like to be hunted." They rode for nearly an hour, climbing into the foothills until they reached a small cabin nestled among the pines. Smoke curled from the chimney, and as they approached, the door opened to reveal a gray-haired man with a shotgun. "Easy, Mac," Adam called. "I've brought someone who needs help." The old man lowered his weapon, squinting at Hannah as Adam helped her down from the horse. "Lord above, boy, you can't stop bringing home strays, can you?" She fell in the river. "She's carrying a child." Mac's demeanor changed instantly. "Get her inside by the fire. I'll heat some broth." The cabin was modest but well kept, with a blazing fire in the stone hearth. Adam set Hannah gently on a chair close to the flames. "Mac was the company cook in my cavalry days," Adam explained as he hung his duster to dry. "Now he keeps house for me while I'm working the herds." "You're a cattleman?" Hannah asked, her teeth still chattering, starting to be. "Got a small spread about 3 miles west." "Building it up little by little." He knelt before her, his expression serious. "Now, how about you tell me why the sheriff of Willow Creek was chasing you like you'd robbed the bank?" Hannah hesitated, clutching the blanket Mac had brought tighter around her shoulders. "I'm Hannah Doyle. And I didn't rob anything except perhaps some reputations." Understanding dawned in Adam's eyes as he glanced at her swollen belly. "I see. The father is a married man," Hannah continued, her voice barely above a whisper. "He's denied everything, of course, called me terrible things. The town believes him. And now they've run you out." Hannah nodded, tears welling in her eyes. "I was going to Colorado. I have a cousin there." "You nearly died making the attempt," Adam said grimly. "That bridge has been unsafe for months. County's too cheap to fix it properly." Mac returned with a steaming mug that he pressed into Hannah's hands. "Drink this. It'll warm you from the inside." The broth was rich and savory, and Hannah hadn't realized how hungry she was until the first sip hit her tongue. She drank gratefully as the two men exchanged looks over her head. "She'll need dry clothes," Adam said, "and rest. I can spare one of my nightshirts, Mac offered, but she'll need more than that come morning. I'll ride to Jackson tomorrow, get what she needs. Hannah lowered the mug. I can't accept your charity. I'll be gone as soon as the weather clears. Adam's expression was unreadable. The weather's fine. It's you that needs clearing up. That river water's nothing to trifle with, especially in your condition. I don't want to be a burden. Then don't argue with the man who pulled you from the drink, Mac said gruffly, but there was kindness in his eyes. Stay the night at least. Get your strength back. Hannah wanted to protest further, but exhaustion was overtaking her, and the warmth of the fire was making her eyelids heavy. Adam noticed and rose to his feet. Mac will show you where you can change. You take my room for tonight. I'll bunk out here. Thank you, Hannah murmured, overwhelmed by the unexpected kindness. Both of you. Later, wearing Mac's oversized nightshirt and wrapped in quilts on Adam's bed, Hannah stared at the rough-hewn ceiling and felt her baby move within her. For the first time since discovering her pregnancy, she allowed herself to hope that somehow things might turn out all right. The sound of low voices carried from the main room where Adam and Mac were still awake. "You're playing with fire, boy," Mac was saying. "Willow Creek's not but 20 miles from here. Word travels." What was I supposed to do? Leave her to drown? Of course not. But keeping her here is another matter. You know how people talk. Let them talk, Adam replied, his voice hard. I've heard worse. That was different, and you know it. The war's been over for 13 years. Some folks have longer memories than that. All I'm saying is be careful. You've worked too hard building this place to have it all torn down over a woman's scandal. There was a long silence, then Adam's voice, quieter now. She reminds me of Sarah. Max sighed heavily. Your sister made her choice, boy. This one might still have a chance. Hannah turned her face into the pillow, shame washing over her. These good men were risking their own reputations to help her. Tomorrow, she decided, she would insist on leaving. She couldn't bring trouble to their door after all they'd done for her. But when morning came, Hannah woke to find herself burning with fever, her body racked with chills. The fall into the river had taken its toll. For 3 days, she drifted in and out of consciousness, as Adam and Mac tended to her, placing cool cloths on her forehead and forcing spoonfuls of broth between her cracked lips. On the 4th day, Hannah opened her eyes to find Adam sitting beside the bed, his expression drawn with concern. Welcome back, he said softly. The baby, Hannah whispered, her hands immediately moving to her belly. Adam smiled. Seems fine. Been kicking up a storm all night. Relief flooded through her. How long have I been ill? 4 days. Had us worried there for a spell. He helped her sit up slightly, propping pillows behind her back. Max made soup. Think you can manage some? Hannah nodded, suddenly aware of her hunger. As Adam went to fetch the soup, she noticed a pile of packages on the chair by the window. What are those? Adam glanced at the parcels. Clothes and some other things you might need. Got them from Jackson while you were sleeping. You shouldn't have already done, he cut her off, his tone brooking no argument. Max said you'd need proper things, especially with the baby coming. The mention of the baby brought Hannah back to reality. I can't stay here. You've been too kind already, but I'll only bring you trouble. Adam returned with a bowl of soup, sitting on the edge of the bed as he handed it to her. Where will you go? I told you, I have a cousin in Colorado. And how will you get there? That old mare of yours is a good animal, but she's not fit for mountain trails, especially carrying a woman in your condition. Hannah had no answer for that. The soup was savory and rich, and she focused on eating to avoid Adam's piercing gaze. Stay until the baby comes, he said finally. It's the sensible thing to do. Why would you do that for a stranger? Hannah asked. You don't even know me. Adam was quiet for a long moment. My sister Sarah found herself in a similar situation during the war. The father was a Union officer passing through our town in Tennessee. When he was killed at Shiloh, Sarah was left alone with her shame. His eyes darkened with old pain. Our father threw her out. She died trying to birth her baby alone in a shepherd's hut. Hannah's hand went to her throat. I'm so sorry. I was fighting for the other side by then. Didn't even know until I came home after Appomattox. Adam's jaw tightened. I won't see another woman suffer the same fate, not if I can help it. The town will talk, Hannah said softly. Your reputation, let them talk. Adam rose, taking the empty bowl from her hands. Rest now. When you're stronger, we'll figure out what comes next. Over the next 2 weeks, Hannah regained her strength. Mac taught her to make biscuits that didn't resemble river rocks, and Adam showed her around the small ranch he was building. It was modest 20 acres of good grazing land, a sturdy barn, and a corral where he broke horses to supplement his income from the small herd of cattle he was building. Why Wyoming? She asked him one evening as they sat on the porch watching the sunset paint the mountains gold. After the war, I mean. Why come so far north? Adam leaned back in his chair, his expression thoughtful. Wanted a fresh start. Too many ghosts back in Tennessee. Too many neighbors who remembered which side I'd fought for. He smiled wryly. Out here, most folks don't care much about that old quarrel, long as you work hard and mind your business. Is that why you stay so isolated? Because of the war, partly, he admitted. And partly because I prefer the company of horses to most people. His gaze shifted to her. Present company accepted, of course. Hannah felt a blush warm her cheeks and turned her attention back to the mountains. In the 2 weeks she'd been at the ranch, she'd found herself increasingly drawn to this quiet, reserved man. Adam Vance wasn't handsome in the conventional way Jacob Turner had been, but there was a steadiness to him, a strength that went deeper than the physical. What about you? Adam asked. You said your father passed. What of your mother? She died when I was 12. Influenza. Hannah smoothed her hands over her growing belly. My father never remarried. It was just the two of us until last winter when his heart gave out. And the father of your child. Adam's voice was carefully neutral. Hannah tensed. Jacob Turner owns the general store in Willow Creek. He was kind to me after my father died. Gave me credit when I couldn't pay, brought me meals sometimes. Her voice dropped to a whisper. I was foolish and lonely. He told me his marriage was in name only, that his wife hadn't been a true wife to him in years. She laughed bitterly. The oldest lie in the world, and I believed it. You loved him. I thought I did. Now I'm not sure I even knew him. Hannah blinked back tears. When I told him about the baby, he said I was trying to trap him, that it could be any man's child. He gave me money for the stage to Denver, told me never to come back. But you stayed. Willow Creek was my home. My father is buried there, I thought. She shook her head. I thought somehow I could make a life for my child there, even with the shame. I was wrong. They sat in silence as the last rays of sunlight faded from the peaks. Finally, Adam spoke again. My offer stands. Stay until the baby comes. After that, if you still want to go to Colorado, I'll make sure you get there safely. Hannah turned to look at him, this man who'd become her unexpected protector. Why are you really doing this, Adam? The truth. His blue eyes met hers steadily. Because it's the right thing to do, and because in this world, sometimes kindness is all we have to offer each other. It wasn't the whole truth, Hannah could sense that, but it was enough for now. The weeks passed, and spring deepened into early summer. Hannah's belly grew rounder, and she found herself settling into life at the small ranch. She took over the cooking from Mac, whose culinary skills were limited at best, and kept the cabin clean and orderly. Adam taught her to ride astride rather than side saddle, adapting an old saddle to accommodate her changing body. A woman out here needs to ride proper, he insisted when she expressed concern about the impropriety. Side saddles fine for town ladies, but useless on the trails. Hannah discovered she enjoyed the freedom of riding astride, even with her ungainly belly. She also enjoyed the way Adam's hands steadied her when he helped her mount and dismount, though she tried not to dwell on such thoughts. One evening in late June, as Hannah was hanging laundry on the line behind the cabin, she heard the sound of approaching riders. She froze, one of Adam's shirts still clutched in her hands. Visitors were rare at the isolated ranch, and her first instinct was to hide. Before she could retreat inside, Adam emerged from the barn, rifle in hand. He gestured for her to stay where she was as Mac appeared on the porch, his shotgun at the ready. The three riders came into view, men Hannah didn't recognize, though their trail-worn appearance suggested they'd been riding hard. "Afternoon," the lead rider called as they approached. "This the Vance spread," Adam nodded, his rifle not quite pointed at the men but ready. "It is. What's your business here, looking for work?" the man replied. "Name's Curtis. These are my brothers Lyle and Wade. Heard in Jackson you might be hiring hands for the season." Hannah watched as Adam studied the men, his expression giving nothing away. Finally, he lowered his rifle slightly. "Who'd you hear that from?" "Feller at the mercantile. Said you were running cattle on your own, might need help with the summer drive." Adam relaxed marginally. "I might at that." "You boys have experience. Worked cattle from Texas to Montana," Curtis said. "Can break horses too if needed." "Dismount and water your horses," Adam said after a moment's consideration. "We'll talk terms." Hannah hurriedly gathered her laundry basket and retreated inside, her heart racing. Adam had mentioned hiring help for the summer, but the sudden appearance of strangers made her acutely aware of her vulnerable position. What would these men think when they saw her condition? What would they say in town? Mac followed her inside, setting his shotgun by the door. "Don't fret, Miss Hannah. Adam's a good judge of character. He won't keep them if they're trouble." "But what will they think of me?" Hannah whispered. "A woman in my condition, living here with two unmarried men." Mac's weathered face creased in a frown. "Folks will talk no matter what you do in this life. Question is whether you let the talk dictate your choices." Before Hannah could respond, Adam entered the cabin. "Those men are experienced hands," he said without preamble. "I'm going to hire them on through the fall. They'll bunk in the barn." "Adam, I should leave," Hannah began, but he cut her off with a sharp gesture. "You're staying. But there's something we need to settle." He glanced at Mac. "Give us a minute, would you?" The old man nodded and stepped outside, closing the door behind him. Adam turned to Hannah, his expression uncharacteristically uncertain. "Those men will assume things about your presence here," he said directly. "Let them." Hannah stared at him. "I don't understand." "Let them think you're my wife." Adam ran a hand through his hair, a gesture she'd come to recognize as a sign of his discomfort. "It's the simplest explanation, and it'll protect your reputation. Pretend to be married." Hannah's voice rose. "That's your solution." "Have you got a better one?" Adam challenged. "You're 7 months along by my count. That baby's coming before summer's end. What story would you prefer we tell?" Hannah sank into a chair, her hands cradling her belly. "I won't drag your name into my scandal, Adam. You've done too much already." "My name can weather it," he said simply. "Yours can't. Not out here, not alone." She looked up at him, this man who'd become so important to her in such a short time. "Why would you do this?" Adam knelt before her chair, taking her hands in his. His calloused palms were warm against her skin. "Because I care what happens to you, Hannah. To both of you." His eyes dropped briefly to her belly before meeting hers again. "Say yes, let me do this for you." Hannah felt tears well in her eyes. "It's too much to ask." "You didn't ask, I offered." His thumbs traced small circles on the backs of her hands. "Say yes, Hannah." The intensity in his blue eyes made her breath catch. "Yes," she whispered, "but only until the baby comes. Then we'll decide what's next." Adam nodded, a small smile touching his lips. "I'll tell the men you're my wife, come from back east to join me now that the ranch is established. They don't need to know more than that." He rose to leave, but Hannah caught his hand. "Adam, thank you for everything." He squeezed her fingers gently before releasing them. "Get some rest, Mrs. Vance. You've laundry to finish in the morning." The pretense of marriage brought changes to the small cabin. Adam moved his few belongings into the room Hannah had been using, sleeping on a pallet on the floor while she took the bed. They were careful to maintain the appearance of a married couple when the ranch hands were present, with Adam showing small gestures of affection, a hand at the small of her back, helping her to her seat at meals, calling her my wife with a warmth that sometimes made Hannah forget it was all for show. The ranch hands Curtis, Lyle, and Wade Johnston were competent cowboys who kept to themselves and worked hard. They treated Hannah with rough courtesy, tipping their hats when she brought meals to the field and calling her Mrs. Vance with no hint of suspicion. Only Mac knew the truth, watching the charade with knowing eyes but keeping his counsel. One evening, as Hannah prepared supper, the old man paused in setting the table to say quietly, "He's not play acting, you know." Hannah looked up from the stew she was stirring. "What do you mean?" Mac glanced toward the door to ensure they were alone. "Adam, he's not pretending when he looks at you the way he does." A flush crept up Hannah's neck. "Don't be ridiculous. He's just being kind. Kindness doesn't make a man's eyes follow a woman the way his follow you." Mac resumed placing forks beside the plates. "Known that boy since he was a raw recruit not old enough to shave properly. Never seen him look at anyone the way he looks at you." Hannah turned back to the stew, her heart beating faster. "Even if that were true, and I'm not saying it is, what future could there possibly be in it? I'm carrying another man's child, Mac. And," the old man shrugged, "way I see it, that child's lucky to have Adam Vance standing up for it, regardless of who planted the seed." Before Hannah could respond, the door opened and Adam entered, bringing the scent of horses and summer dust with him. His eyes found Hannah immediately, a smile warming his face. "Something smells good," he said, removing his hat and hanging it by the door. "The boys will be in shortly." "Just finishing up with the new colt." Hannah nodded, suddenly flustered under his gaze as Mac's words echoed in her mind. Was it possible? Did Adam truly have feelings for her that went beyond compassion and duty? The question lingered as summer progressed. July brought scorching heat and occasional violent thunderstorms that swept across the valley, rattling the cabin's windows and sending the cattle huddling beneath the sheltering pines. During one such storm, Hannah sat by the window watching lightning fork across the sky, unable to sleep due to the baby's persistent kicking and the ache in her lower back. Adam found her there, wrapped in a quilt despite the warm night. "Can't sleep?" he asked, his voice rough with his own interrupted slumber. Hannah shook her head. "The baby's restless tonight. I think the storm bothers him." "Him?" Adam smiled, taking the chair opposite hers. "You're certain it's a boy?" "Just a feeling," Hannah admitted, rubbing her belly. "A strong, stubborn little boy. Like his mother then," she laughed softly. "I'm not strong, Adam. If I were, I wouldn't be in this situation." "That's not true." Adam's voice was firm. "Strength isn't about never making mistakes. It's about how you face the consequences." "Is that what I am to you? A consequence you're facing?" The question slipped out before Hannah could stop it. Adam went still, his eyes reflecting the lightning outside. "Is that what you think?" he asked quietly. Hannah looked down at her hands. "I don't know what to think anymore. You've given up so much to help me, your privacy, your reputation, even your bed. All for a woman you barely know carrying another man's child. I know you better than you think, Hannah Doyle. Adam leaned forward, his elbows on his knees. I know you sing to yourself when you think no one's listening. I know you're afraid of spiders but won't let Mac kill them, insisting he take them outside instead. I know you're smarter than most men I've met, including the father of your child, who was fool enough to let you go. Hannah's breath caught in her throat. Adam, let me finish, he said gently. I know you worry about being a burden, but you've made this place more of a home in 3 months than I managed in 3 years. And I know that when you smile, really smile, not the polite one you give the Johnston boys, it lights up something in me I thought died along with my sister. A crack of thunder punctuated his words, so loud it rattled the dishes in the cupboard. Hannah jumped, and Adam was instantly at her side, his hand covering hers where it rested on her belly. Easy, he murmured. Just the storm passing. But it wasn't just the storm that had Hannah's heart racing. It was Adam's nearness, the warmth of his hand on hers and the naked emotion in his eyes. I don't want your pity, she whispered. Good, because I'm not offering it. Adam's fingers intertwined with hers. What I feel for you, Hannah, has nothing to do with pity. Before she could respond, the baby kicked forcefully, right against their joined hands. Adam's eyes widened in surprise, then crinkled with delight. That was quite a wallop, he laughed. Hannah smiled, the tension of the moment broken. He does that when he hears your voice. Have you noticed? Even when you're outside, if you call to Mac or the boys, he starts kicking. Something shifted in Adam's expression, a softening she couldn't quite name. His hand moved gently over her belly and the baby kicked again in response. Hey there, little one, he said softly. You're keeping your mama awake. The tenderness in his voice brought tears to Hannah's eyes. In that moment, she knew with absolute certainty that she was falling in love with Adam Vance, and that knowledge terrified her more than any storm. August brought the hottest days of summer, with the sun beating down mercilessly on the valley. Hannah's time was drawing near, and she found herself increasingly uncomfortable in the heat. Adam insisted she rest during the hottest part of the day, taking over many of her chores despite his own exhausting work schedule. One sweltering afternoon, Hannah was startled from a light doze by the sound of raised voices outside. She struggled to her feet, her unwieldy body making even simple movements difficult now, and went to the window. What she saw made her blood run cold. Sheriff Mills from Willow Creek sat astride his horse in the yard, flanked by 2 deputies. Adam stood facing them, his stance tense but his hands carefully away from the pistol at his hip. Hannah couldn't make out what they were saying, but her heart pounded with fear. Had they discovered she was alive? Had someone from town seen her on one of her rare trips to Jackson? She moved to the door, determined to face whatever was coming, but Mac intercepted her. Stay inside, he said firmly, his weathered hand on her arm. Adam will handle this. But if they're here for me, all the more reason to let Adam do the talking. Mac's expression was grave. Trust him, Hannah. He knows what he's doing. Through the window, Hannah watched as Adam gestured toward the barn where the Johnston brothers had emerged with wary expressions. The sheriff nodded, and the deputies dismounted to follow the cowboys inside, presumably to inspect the horses. Hannah felt sick with dread. Was Adam being accused of horse theft? After what seemed an eternity, the deputies emerged from the barn, shaking their heads at the sheriff. There was more conversation, with Adam pointing toward the northern ridge, before Sheriff Mills finally tipped his hat and the 3 lawmen rode away. The moment they were out of sight, Hannah rushed outside, ignoring Mac's protests. Adam, what happened? What did they want? Adam turned to her, his face grim. They're looking for cattle rustlers, Band of them hit the Peterson place last night, drove off 30 head and killed a ranch hand. Hannah's hand flew to her mouth. That's terrible, but why come here? We're the closest spread to the north, Adam explained, leading her back toward the cabin. The heat was oppressive, and he was clearly concerned about her standing in the sun. They're checking all the ranches in the area, making sure we haven't seen anything suspicious. And the horses? Hannah asked as they reached the porch. There was a distinctive horse among the rustlers, a paint with unusual markings. They wanted to make sure it wasn't one of ours. Adam helped her into a chair, his hand lingering on her shoulder. Everything's fine, Hannah. They weren't here for you. Relief made her dizzy, or perhaps it was the heat. I was so afraid. I know. Adam knelt beside her chair, taking her hands in his. But you need to understand something. You're my wife as far as anyone around here is concerned. That includes the law. I wouldn't let them take you, Hannah. Not for any reason. The fierce protectiveness in his voice made her heart swell. I know you wouldn't, she whispered. That night, after a supper made nearly unbearable by the lingering heat, Hannah tossed and turned on the bed, unable to find a comfortable position. Her back ached fiercely, and the baby seemed to be pressing directly on her bladder, forcing her to make frequent trips outside to the privy. During one such trip, in the darkest part of the night, Hannah paused on her way back to the cabin, gasping as a sharp pain lanced through her abdomen. She leaned against the porch railing, waiting for it to pass. When it did, she made her way inside, only to be struck by another pain so intense it drove her to her knees with a cry she couldn't suppress. Adam was instantly awake, on his feet and at her side. Hannah, what is it? The baby, she gasped as the pain receded. I think it's time. Adam's face paled visibly even in the dim light of the banked fire. Now, are you sure? As if in answer, another contraction seized her, forcing a groan from her lips. Adam didn't hesitate. He scooped her up and placed her gently on the bed, then went to wake Mac. The next hours passed in a blur of pain for Hannah. Adam sent one of the Johnston boys galloping toward Jackson to fetch the midwife, but Hannah knew the woman wouldn't arrive in time. Her baby was coming fast, driven perhaps by the same impatience that had kept him kicking through the night. Mac proved to be unexpectedly knowledgeable, directing Adam to heat water and gather clean linens. Army life teaches you things, the old man explained gruffly when Hannah expressed surprise between contractions. Seen my share of births in camp. Women followed their men, even to war. As dawn broke over the mountains, Hannah's pains came harder and faster. Adam never left her side, supporting her back when she needed to sit up, wiping her brow with a cool cloth, and murmuring encouragement when she felt she couldn't bear another moment of the relentless pain. You can do this, Hannah, he said firmly when she cried that she couldn't go on. You're the strongest person I know, just a little more. With a final, tremendous effort, Hannah bore down, and the cabin filled with the indignant wail of a newborn. Mac's weathered hands caught the child, and he announced with evident satisfaction, a boy, healthy as a horse by the sound of him. Adam helped Hannah sit up against the pillows as Mac placed the squalling infant in her arms. Tears streamed down her face as she looked at her son for the first time, red-faced and angry at his abrupt entrance into the world, with a shock of dark hair plastered to his tiny head. He's perfect, she whispered, running a gentle finger over his cheek. The baby quieted at her touch, his eyes a deep, unfocused blue seeming to search for her face. When she looked up, Hannah was startled to see tears in Adam's eyes as well. He reached out hesitantly, his finger tracing the curve of the baby's small fist. To both their surprise, the infant grabbed hold, his tiny fingers wrapping around Adam's much larger one with surprising strength. Strong grip, Adam said, his voice thick with emotion. He's going to be a fine horseman someday. Hannah felt her heart expand with love for her son, yes, but also for this man who had changed her life so completely. "Would you like to hold him?" she asked softly. Adam looked startled, then honored. "Are you sure?" In answer, Hannah carefully transferred the bundled infant to Adam's arms. He held the baby with unexpected confidence, cradling him close to his chest. "Hello there, little man," he murmured. "You've had quite a journey, haven't you?" Mac, watching from the foot of the bed, cleared his throat noisily. "I'll go tell the boys the news," he said, heading for the door. "They've been pacing out there like expectant fathers themselves." When they were alone, Hannah watched as Adam gazed down at her son with a tenderness that made her throat tight. "He needs a name," she said after a moment. Adam looked up. "Have you thought about it?" "I was thinking Matthew," Hannah said. "It was my father's name." "Matthew," Adam repeated, looking down at the baby. "It suits him." "Matthew Adam Doyle," Hannah added softly. Adam's head jerked up, his eyes wide with surprise. "Hannah, you don't have to, I want to," she interrupted. "If you don't mind, you've done so much for us. I want him to carry something of you with him, wherever life takes us." Adam swallowed hard, blinking rapidly. "I'd be honored," he finally managed. He returned the now sleeping infant to Hannah's arms, then sat beside her on the edge of the bed. "Hannah, there's something I need to say." The gravity in his voice made her look up from the baby's face. "What is it?" "I know we agreed this arrangement was temporary, just until the baby came." Adam took a deep breath. "But I don't want it to be temporary anymore." Hannah's pulse quickened. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying I want you to stay. Both of you." Adam ran a hand through his hair, a gesture that betrayed his nervousness. "I'm saying I love you, Hannah Doyle. I think I have since I pulled you from that river. And I love this little boy too, even though he's only been in the world for an hour." Hannah stared at him, scarcely able to believe what she was hearing. "Adam, let me finish," he said, taking her free hand in his. "I know it's fast. I know there are 1,000 reasons why you might say no, but I'm asking anyway." His blue eyes held her steadily. "Marry me, Hannah. For real this time. Let me be a father to Matthew. Let me spend the rest of my days trying to make you both happy." Tears blurred Hannah's vision. "You don't have to do this out of obligation." "Obligation?" Adam's laugh was soft and disbelieving. "Hannah, loving you is the furthest thing from an obligation I've ever known. It's as natural to me as breathing." He squeezed her hand gently. "Say yes. Make me the happiest man in Wyoming territory." Hannah looked down at her son, sleeping peacefully in the crook of her arm, then back at the man who had saved them both in more ways than one. "Yes," she whispered, her voice breaking on the word. "Yes, Adam Vance, I'll marry you." The joy that transformed Adam's face was like sunrise breaking over the mountains. He leaned forward and kissed her their first kiss, tender and full of promise. When Matthew stirred between them, Adam pulled back with a soft laugh, his forehead resting against Hannah's. "I think he's giving us his blessing," he murmured. Hannah smiled through her tears. "Or reminding us he's still here." Adam gently stroked the baby's dark hair. "I'll never let him forget it," he promised. "As far as I'm concerned, Hannah, this is my son now. And I'll make sure the whole world knows it." 2 weeks after Matthew's birth, Hannah stood in the small church in Jackson, wearing a blue dress Adam had bought her and holding her son in her arms as the minister pronounced them husband and wife. Mac stood as witness, beaming with grandfatherly pride as Adam kissed his bride and then placed a gentle kiss on Matthew's forehead. The small wedding party was leaving the church when Hannah spotted a familiar face across the street. Mrs. Peterson from Willow Creek, staring at them with undisguised shock. The woman hurried over to intercept them, her expression a mixture of disbelief and righteous indignation. "Hannah Doyle, we thought you were dead, drowned in the river." She looked accusingly at Adam, then at the baby in Hannah's arms. "And now you're married, with a child." Adam stepped forward, placing himself slightly in front of Hannah and Matthew. "That's Hannah Vance now, madam," he said politely but firmly. "My wife and our son, Mrs." Peterson's eyes narrowed. "Your son? That child can't possibly be yours. Everyone in Willow Creek knows who—" "That's my son," Adam interrupted, his voice steel wrapped in velvet. "And I'd thank you to remember it." The woman drew herself up indignantly. "Do you know what this woman is? What she's done?" "I know exactly who my wife is," Adam replied, his arm going protectively around Hannah's shoulders. "She's the strongest, most loving woman I've ever known, and we're building a life together that's no concern of yours or anyone in Willow Creek, Mrs." Peterson looked as though she'd been slapped. "Well, if you'll excuse us," Adam continued smoothly, "we're celebrating our wedding day and I'd like to take my family home." Without waiting for a response, he guided Hannah around the sputtering woman and toward their waiting wagon, where Mac was already seated with the reins in hand. "Are you all right?" Adam asked quietly as he helped Hannah up to the seat, careful of the baby in her arms. Hannah looked back at Mrs. Peterson, who was already hurrying away, no doubt eager to spread the scandalous news back in Willow Creek. A month ago, such an encounter would have devastated her. Now she found herself smiling. "I'm fine," she said, meaning it completely. "More than fine." Adam climbed up beside her, putting his arm around her as Mac clicked to the horses. "That woman will talk," he warned. "Let her," Hannah replied, leaning against her husband's solid strength. "I have everything I need right here." The wagon rolled out of town, carrying the small family toward the ranch that was now truly a home. In Hannah's arms, Matthew slept peacefully, secure in his mother's embrace, and his father's love, a love freely given, with no reservation or condition. Adam pressed a kiss to Hannah's temple. "I love you, Mrs. Vance." Hannah smiled up at him, her heart full. "And I love you, Mr. Vance." As the wagon crested the rise that would take them home, Hannah thought of all the twists and turns that had brought her to this moment, the shame and fear that had driven her from Willow Creek, the near tragedy that had delivered her into Adam's path, and the love that had grown between them against all odds. Life had a way of bringing unexpected gifts, even in the midst of hardship. Matthew stirred in her arms, his tiny hand reaching up to touch her chin. Hannah caught it gently, pressing a kiss to his palm. This child, once the source of her greatest shame, was now her greatest joy and a living testament to the healing power of love. Behind them, the town of Jackson dwindled in the distance, and with it, the ghosts of the past. Ahead lay the future they would build together, Adam, Hannah, and the son they both claimed as their own. Autumn brought change to the valley. The leaves of the aspen trees turned gold and crimson, creating a fiery tapestry against the evergreen pines. The air grew crisp, carrying the scent of wood smoke and the promise of winter to come. On the Vance ranch, preparations for the cold season were well underway, hay stored in the barn, firewood stacked high against the cabin walls, and the cattle moved to lower pastures where they would be easier to feed when snow blanketed the hills. Hannah stood on the porch, Matthew bundled against her chest in a sling Adam had fashioned from an old blanket, watching as her husband and the Johnston brothers guided the last of the cattle into the winter pasture. At 3 months old, Matthew was thriving, a cheerful, sturdy baby with Adam's blue eyes and a shock of dark hair that refused to lie flat no matter how much Hannah tried to smooth it. The sound of hoofbeats drew her attention as Mac rode in from town, his saddlebags bulging with supplies. The old man dismounted with a groan, his joints protesting the cold weather more each year. "Letters," he called, extracting a small bundle from his pocket as he approached the porch. "And news from town." Hannah took the letters. Noting one addressed to Adam from his former commanding officer in Tennessee, the two kept up a sporadic correspondence, and another, surprisingly, addressed to her. The handwriting was unfamiliar. "What news?" she asked, tucking the letters into her apron pocket to examine later. Mac's expression was difficult to read. "The Turner family has left Willow Creek," he said bluntly. "Lock, stock, and barrel. Sold the general store and headed back east from what I heard." Hannah felt a strange hollowness in her chest at the mention of Jacob Turner's name. Once, it had been the name that haunted her dreams and waking hours alike. Now it seemed to belong to someone she had known in another lifetime. "I see," she said quietly. "Did you hear why?" Max shrugged, taking off his hat and running a hand through his thinning hair. "Seems Mrs. Peterson's gossip found fertile ground back in Willow Creek. Word is Mrs. Turner couldn't abide the whispers and stares once folks knew her husband had fathered a child with you." Hannah winced, instinctively holding Matthew closer. "I never wanted that. I never wanted anyone to be hurt because of what happened." "Ain't your burden to carry," Max said firmly. "Turner made his bed long before you came into the picture from what I hear. Man had a reputation that preceded him." He nodded toward Matthew. "You and that little one are better off here with a man who stands by his word." Hannah smiled, grateful for Mac's blunt wisdom. "We are," she agreed. "I don't know what we'd have done without you and Adam." "HMPH," Mac grunted, but she could see he was pleased. The old soldier had come to dote on Matthew with an almost grandfatherly affection, carving wooden toys for him and singing off-key lullabies that somehow always soothed the baby to sleep. "Speaking of Adam, there's something else you should know." Hannah tensed. "What is it?" "Town's full of talk about the Vance ranch," Max said. "Seems your husband's getting quite a reputation as a horseman. That Appaloosa stallion he broke for the banker in Jackson has folks talking. There's talk of Army contracts for cavalry mounts." Pride swelled in Hannah's chest. Adam had a gift with horses that went beyond mere training. He seemed to understand the animals on an instinctive level, gaining their trust through patience and respect rather than breaking their spirit through force. "That's wonderful," she said sincerely. "Adam deserves recognition for his work." Mac nodded, his expression softening. "He's a good man, your husband. Never seen him as happy as he's been since you and the little one came into his life." Hannah felt warmth spread through her despite the autumn chill. "He's made us happy too, Mac. Happier than I ever thought possible." Later that evening, after Matthew had been fed and settled in the cradle Adam had built for him, Hannah remembered the letter in her apron pocket. She withdrew it curiously, noting the postmark from Colorado. "Who's it from?" Adam asked, looking up from the harness he was repairing by the fireside. "I'm not sure," Hannah admitted, breaking the seal. "It's postmarked from Denver." As she unfolded the letter, a bank draft fluttered to the table. Hannah gasped when she saw the amount, $500, a small fortune. "Adam," she breathed, pushing the draft toward him. "Look at this." Adam set aside the harness and examined the draft, his eyebrows rising in surprise. "Who's sending you this kind of money?" Hannah scanned the letter, her eyes widening as she read. "It's from Jacob Turner's wife," she said in disbelief. Adam stiffened. "What does she want?" "Nothing." Hannah continued reading, her hands trembling slightly. She says she's known about Jacob's indiscretions for years, that there were others before me, but he always paid them off to leave town quietly. She writes that she stayed with him for the children's sake, but when she learned about me and the baby, something changed." Hannah looked up at Adam, her eyes wide. "She's left him, Adam. Taken the children and her family's money. Apparently, the general store was purchased with her dowry, and gone back to her family in Philadelphia. She says this money is for Matthew, to ensure he has opportunities in life, despite his father's cowardice. Adam was silent for a long moment, his expression unreadable. "And how do you feel about that?" he finally asked. Hannah looked down at the letter again. "I feel sad for her and for their children, but mostly I feel grateful. Yes." Hannah set the letter down and moved to sit beside Adam, taking his hand in hers. "If Jacob Turner had been a different kind of man, if he had stood by me when I told him about the baby, I might never have left Willow Creek. I might never have met you." She squeezed his fingers. "Everything that happened, as painful as it was, led me here, to you, to the life we're building together." Adam brought her hand to his lips, pressing a kiss to her knuckles. "So what will you do with the money?" Hannah hadn't considered that yet. "I'm not sure. Put it aside for Matthew's education, perhaps. Or—" she hesitated, then continued, "we could use it to expand the ranch, buy more breeding stock for the herd, build that larger house you've been sketching." Adam's eyes softened as he looked at her. "You'd want to invest it here, in our future." "This is our home," Hannah said simply. "Yours, mine, and Matthew's. I want to help make it everything you've dreamed it could be." Adam pulled her close, his arm strong around her shoulders. "I already have everything I've dreamed of, Hannah Vance. You and Matthew are enough for me." He pressed a kiss to her temple. "But if you want to put down deeper roots here, I won't object." Hannah leaned against him, content in the warmth of his embrace and the life they were creating together. Outside, the wind picked up, rattling the windows with the first true breath of winter. Inside, the fire crackled in the hearth, casting golden light over the small family gathered in its warmth. "You ever regret it?" Hannah asked softly after a comfortable silence. "Taking in a pregnant woman with nothing but troubles to her name?" Adam tilted her chin up so she had to meet his gaze. "Not for a single moment," he said firmly. "The day I pulled you from that river was the luckiest day of my life, Hannah, and don't you ever forget it." As if on cue, Matthew stirred in his cradle, making the small fussing sounds that signaled he was hungry. Hannah rose to tend to him, lifting the baby into her arms with practiced ease. As she settled into the rocking chair to nurse him, she looked up to find Adam watching them, his expression one of such profound love it nearly took her breath away. "What?" she asked, smiling at the intensity of his gaze. Adam shook his head slightly, as if trying to find the right words. "Just thinking how different things might have been," he said quietly. "If I hadn't decided to ride by the river that day, if you'd gone to Colorado like you planned." Hannah stroked Matthew's downy head as he nursed contentedly. "I believe some things are meant to be, Adam. Whatever paths we might have taken, I think they would have led us to each other eventually." Adam crossed to her side, kneeling beside the rocking chair to be at eye level with his wife and son. He reached out to touch Matthew's small hand, which immediately curled around his finger with that strong grip that never failed to delight him. "You know," he said softly, "when I first claimed him as my son, it was to protect you both from gossip. But now—" He swallowed hard, emotion making his voice rough. "Now I can't imagine loving him more if he were my own flesh and blood." Hannah felt tears prick her eyes. "He is yours, Adam, in all the ways that truly matter." Adam leaned forward to press a kiss to her lips, then to the top of Matthew's head. "Thank you," he whispered, "for making me a father." In that moment, wrapped in the warmth of their small home with winter settling over the valley outside, Hannah knew with absolute certainty that the road that had led her here, however difficult and painful it had been, was the one she was always meant to travel. The shame and fear that had once defined her existence had been transformed into something beautiful. A family built on choice rather than obligation, on love freely given rather than demanded. Outside, the first snowflakes of winter began to fall, dusting the valley with white. Inside, Hannah Vance held her son close and smiled at her husband, her heart full with the knowledge that she was exactly where she belonged. Spring came to the valley with a rush of green and the cheerful chorus of returning birds. The winter had been hard but not unbearable, with enough clear days between storms for Adam and the Johnston brothers to keep the cattle fed and healthy. The small herd had weathered well, and the spring calving promised to increase their numbers substantially. Hannah stood in the dooryard of their new home, a sturdy two-story house built over the winter months with lumber hauled from Jackson, and the labor of every hand on the ranch. Matthew, now 8 months old and determined to crawl everywhere at alarming speed, sat on a blanket nearby, intently studying a wooden horse Adam had carved for him. "Careful with him," Hannah called to Mac, who was ostensibly watching the baby while she hung laundry. "He's quicker than he looks." The old man chuckled, settling himself on a stump near the blanket. "Got his daddy's way with horses already," he observed as Matthew made the wooden toy gallop across the blanket with surprising coordination for one so young. Hannah smiled at that. Though Matthew would never know it, Jacob Turner's bank draft had indeed funded the expansion of the ranch, including the purchase of 6 prime mares to begin Adam's dream of breeding quality horses. The money had also built this house, with its glass windows and proper bedrooms a far cry from the snug but cramped cabin they'd shared through the early months of their marriage. The sound of approaching riders drew her attention. Adam appeared from the direction of the new corral, shading his eyes against the spring sunshine as 3 men on horseback approached the ranch yard. Hannah tensed slightly. Visitors were more frequent now that the Vance ranch was becoming known for its horses, but she still felt a flicker of apprehension whenever strangers arrived. Adam crossed to stand beside her, his hand coming to rest reassuringly at the small of her back. "Expecting anyone?" he asked quietly. Hannah shook her head. "No. Mac was in town yesterday, but he didn't mention anyone coming this way." As the riders drew closer, Hannah realized with a start that she recognized one of them. The tall figure in the lead was none other than Sheriff Mills from Willow Creek. Her heart began to pound, old fear rising like bile in her throat. Adam must have felt her tense, because his hand at her back became more deliberate, a silent message of support. "Stay calm," he murmured. "Whatever this is, we'll handle it together." Sheriff Mills reined in his horse a respectful distance away, tipping his hat to Hannah before addressing Adam. "Mr. Vance. Adam Vance." Adam nodded, his posture relaxed but alert. "That's right. What can I do for you, Sheriff?" "Sheriff Mills, Willow Creek," the man introduced himself. "These are my deputies, Collins and Hargrove. We're here on official business." Hannah felt light-headed. What possible official business could bring the sheriff of Willow Creek to their doorstep after all this time? "Regarding," Adam prompted when the sheriff didn't immediately continue. Sheriff Mills cleared his throat, looking uncomfortable. "It concerns your wife, sir, and the child." Adam's hand at Hannah's back became protective rather than merely supportive. "My wife and son are my concern, Sheriff. State your business plainly." The sheriff dismounted, handing his reins to one of the deputies. "May we speak privately, Mr. Vance? This is a delicate matter." "Anything concerning my family can be said in front of my wife," Adam replied firmly. "Now, what is this about?" Sheriff Mills sighed, removing his hat and running a hand through his graying hair. "Very well. I'm here about Jacob Turner, formerly of Willow Creek. The man passed away 2 weeks ago in Denver. Consumption, I'm told." Hannah felt a shock run through her at the news. Jacob dead. The man who had once meant so much to her, whose child grew stronger every day beneath the Wyoming sky, was gone from this world. "I'm sorry to hear that," Adam said carefully, "but I don't see what it has to do with my family." The sheriff shifted uncomfortably. Before he died, Turner made a confession to his minister. He admitted that the child Mrs. Vance carries or carried, I see the boy is born, is indeed his son. Adam's expression remained impassive. "That's not news to us, Sheriff." "No, I don't expect it is." Sheriff Mills looked directly at Hannah for the first time. "Mrs. Vance, Turner's final request was that his legitimate children acknowledge their half-brother. He left a portion of his estate to the boy, to be held in trust until he comes of age." Hannah stared at the sheriff in disbelief. "He what?" "It's all legal and proper," Sheriff Mills continued, withdrawing a document from his coat. "The family's lawyer in Denver asked me to deliver this to you as I was heading this way on other business." Adam took the document, unfolding it to reveal a formal letter from a legal firm in Denver. He read it quickly, his eyebrows rising slightly, before passing it to Hannah. The letter was brief but clear. Jacob Turner, in his final days, had acknowledged paternity of Hannah's child and set aside a trust of $1,000 for the boy Matthew, born to Hannah Doyle, now Vance. The money was to be managed by a Denver bank until Matthew reached the age of 21, at which time he would receive the full amount plus accrued interest. Hannah looked up from the letter, struggling to process this unexpected development. "I don't understand," she said finally. "Why would he do this now, after denying us after everything?" Sheriff Mills shrugged. "Can't speak to the man's motives, madam. Death has a way of clarifying things for folks, I suppose. Makes them want to set things right before they meet their maker." Adam folded the letter and tucked it into his pocket. "Thank you for delivering this, Sheriff. Is there anything else?" The sheriff hesitated, then said, "There is one more thing. Turner's widow, his second wife, that is, not the Philadelphia woman she'd like to correspond with Mrs. Vance. About the boy. She has children of her own by Turner, and she feels they should know their brother, even if only through letters and perhaps visits when they're older." Hannah looked at Adam, uncertain how to respond. This was the last thing she had expected: acknowledgement, legitimacy of a sort for Matthew. Adam's expression softened as he met her gaze, a silent question in his eyes. Hannah nodded slightly, and Adam turned back to the sheriff. "My wife will consider corresponding with Mrs. Turner," he said. "But I want to be clear about something, Sheriff. Matthew is my son in every way that matters. He bears my name and he'll be raised as a Vance." Sheriff Mills nodded, replacing his hat. "I understand, Mr. Vance, and for what it's worth, I'm glad to see Mrs. Vance and the boy doing so well. There were those in Willow Creek who feared the worst after the bridge collapse. As you can see, we're thriving," Hannah said, finding her voice at last. "Please tell Mrs. Turner she may write to me if she wishes. I won't deny Matthew knowledge of his birth father's family when he's old enough to understand." The sheriff tipped his hat again. "I'll pass along the message, madam, and now if you could direct us to the Larson place. We've got official business there as well." Adam gave the sheriff directions to the neighboring ranch, and the three lawmen rode out as quickly as they had arrived. When they were gone, Hannah sank onto the bench beside the door, her knees suddenly weak. "Are you all right?" Adam asked, sitting beside her and taking her hand. Hannah stared at the letter he'd returned to her. "I don't know," she admitted. "It's so unexpected. All this time I thought Jacob had simply forgotten about us, put us out of his mind and gone on with his life." "It seems he couldn't," Adam said quietly. "Not completely." Hannah looked across the yard to where Matthew was attempting to pull himself up using Mac's knee for support, the old man encouraging him with gentle words. "What do we tell him? When he's older?" Adam followed her gaze, his expression thoughtful. "We tell him the truth, Hannah." that the man who gave him life couldn't find the courage to be his father, but that he was loved nonetheless. By you, by me, by everyone who knows him. And the money, Hannah asked. The trust. That's Matthew's birthright, Adam said simply. We'll make sure he receives it when he's of age. But we'll also make sure he understands that his true inheritance is here, this land, this ranch, the life we're building together. Hannah leaned against Adam's solid shoulder, drawing strength from his steady presence as she had so many times before. I never expected this, she murmured. Acknowledgement, legitimacy of a sort. Does it matter to you? Adam asked, his voice carefully neutral. That Turner finally acknowledged what we've known all along. Hannah considered the question seriously. Once, Jacob Turner's recognition would have meant everything to her: salvation from shame, a place in respectable society, security for her child. Now it seemed almost irrelevant, a footnote to the life she had built without him. No, she said finally, with a certainty that surprised even her. It doesn't change anything that matters. Matthew has a father who loves him, who chose him. She turned to look at Adam, reaching up to touch his face. Who chooses him every day? Adam caught her hand and pressed a kiss to her palm. And who will continue to choose him and you for all the days to come? A squeal of delight drew their attention back to Matthew, who had managed to pull himself upright and was bouncing excitedly, still holding Mac's hands for balance. Would you look at that? Mac called, beaming with pride. Boy's going to be walking before we know it. Adam rose and crossed the yard in a few long strides, kneeling in front of his son. Is that right, Matthew? You ready to run with the horses already? The baby laughed, releasing one of Mac's hands to reach for Adam. In that moment of transition, he wobbled precariously, then took one halting step forward before tumbling into Adam's waiting arms. Did you see that? Adam called to Hannah, his face alight with joy. He took a step, all on his own. Hannah joined them, her heart so full it felt it might burst. She knelt beside Adam, stroking Matthew's dark hair as he babbled excitedly in his father's arms. He's growing so fast, she murmured. Before we know it, he'll be riding his own pony. And helping with the calving and learning to rope, Adam added, bouncing Matthew gently. Won't you, son? You're going to be the finest horseman in the territory. Matthew patted Adam's cheeks with both hands, a gesture of affection that never failed to melt Hannah's heart. Looking at them together, this child born of one man's weakness and another's strength, she felt a profound gratitude for the strange, winding path that had led her here. I love you, she said softly, the words meant for both her husband and her son. Both of you so much. Adam's eyes met hers over Matthew's head, blue and clear as the Wyoming sky. And we love you, Hannah Vance, more than words can say. As the spring sun warmed the new grass, and the sounds of the ranch horses nickering, cattle lowing in the distance, men calling to each other as they worked filled the air around them, Hannah knew she had found something precious few ever discover. A love born not of obligation or convention, but of choice. A love that had seen beyond shame and circumstance to the worth of the human heart beneath. They had built this life together, stone by stone and day by day, from the ashes of broken dreams and the fertile soil of new beginnings. And they would continue to build it, for Matthew and for themselves, for all the days to come. The letter from Jacob Turner's widow, when it arrived 2 weeks later, would be answered with grace and openness. Matthew would grow up knowing the truth of his origins, but secure in the knowledge of who his true father was, the man who had claimed him not by blood but by choice, who had stood before the world and said, "That's my son." And for Hannah, the woman who had once fled her home in shame and fear, there would be the daily miracle of waking beside the man who had seen her at her most vulnerable and found not weakness, but strength. The man who had taught her that love, true love, was not about possession or pride, but about protection, acceptance, and the courage to choose each other, day after day, through whatever storms life might bring. As Matthew took another tentative step, then another, reaching now for her hands, Hannah Vance smiled through happy tears. The child they had both chosen, the life they had built together, the love that had transformed shame into joy, these were the true riches of her life, worth more than all the gold in Wyoming territory. And as Adam's arm came around her shoulders, pulling her and Matthew into the circle of his embrace, Hannah knew with bone-deep certainty that she was, at last and forever, home.